So the last things I want to talk about is a couple other elements that you could find in water that could also cause some health problems and related to geology. We'll talk about local problems tomorrow. So iodine. Inside of water, selenium if you get iodine from iodized salt. So one of the things that we do is we put iodine into all of our salt, but you can get selenium from a lot of different types of food. If you go every now and then, these what do you call it? Vitamin millionaires are like, oh, the newest thing that's going to save you from everything is, and selenium was that for a while. That everybody doesn't have enough selenium in your diet. So it gets into our water and our food from different ways. Again, it's related to our geology of the system. First of all, iodine can get into our atmosphere through different things, and so we can get it through our soils, our land. It can get into our marine environments and into there. But this is the iodine cycle, so it does transport through the environment, but we're really not focusing on that. We're really going to just focus about, do we have enough iodine in our diets? And that's always an issue that people have. This is what goiters looks like. So this is somebody who doesn't have any iodine in their diet, and so this is one of the problems. They used to have, like, if I showed a map of Europe with iodine, they didn't have enough iodine, and so they would wear those collars. If you think about those, that time period in history when everybody was wearing these really big puffy collars and stuff like that. Well, one of the reasons those came into fashion, and especially like in England and stuff like that, was to hide the fact that people would have these goiters on their necks. And so you need to have a little bit of iodine in your diet, because if you don't, you have a lack of iodine, iodine deficiency disorder. And so you can get these goiters, so that your thyroid gland that's right in here will start to extrude. You can also have stunted growth and mental health development problems with it. And so the World Health Organization estimates that greater than 1 billion people on the planet have a problem with not having enough iodine in their diet. So is this a problem in the United States? Well, it could be. So everywhere you see this yellowish color, it's where the glaciers were and stuff like that. These areas have been identified as iodine deficiency in their drinking water. We up in this region, talk about that glacial areas that we've talked about before, don't have enough iodine inside of our natural drinking water. And so if we don't have iodized salts, so this is why we have iodized salts, and so if you drink the fancy, you only use the Himalayan salts, and you do the fancy salts, you might not get enough iodine in your diet, and we don't have any iodine really inside of our drinking water supplies around here. You could start to develop goiters, and so this becomes the goiters belt of things like that. And so we iodize table salts and drink and oil in order to supplement it just enough in order to keep that out. Where else did I mention iodine? If you guys remember, with nuclear power, they give out the potassium iodine because that's the first place that iodine, that radioactive iodine that, like from Chernobyl and everything like that, would hit the thyroid, and so people would have to have that removed from in areas with it, and so they give them non-radiogenic iodine to overwhelm the system. So keep this in mind. That's another issue with iodine. And then, like I just mentioned, the nuclear so radioactive iodine found as a problem for a lot of people in this area. And I posted that article. Thank you, some of the students who sent me that article about the fires that are now happening in this area and releasing some of the radioactivity into the smoke in there. But these areas here had seen a release of this radioactive iodine with this, and so that it rapidly got into the food chain. It related to thyroid cancers that people were seeing in here into that region. So this also links back to our talks on the nuclear power and nuclear energy. Selenium, again, this is one of those, ooh, everybody needs selenium in your diet thing. We benefit from it from a 0.4 to 0.1. We do need about 0.4 parts per million or 0.4 milligrams per liter inside of any of our water and stuff like that. We just need a very little bit of it. Without any selenium in our diets, we can cause macular degeneration, impeding growth, fertility problems, liver disease in there. But if we start to hit this 4, this is when cattle that were eating it was too rich in selenium, and so they were calling it local weeds, and that was called blind staggers, and they were causing all these problems inside of it. It would cause toxic. Really, we don't want to go above this 0.1, so if you have too much of it, it can cause problems. So We want to keep that lower. Selenium can be found in a lot of different types of rocks. Again, we find it a lot in our phosphorite rocks. So again, it's in there. It has a lot of different valence states into there. Concentrations highest are found in our phosphorite. So we can get selenium from that. Again, mining it. We can extract it out when we do the for the fluoride and we do the phosphate. We can also get a little bit of selenium. That selenium then can end up inside of our multivitamins into there. But we get enough selenium just from our normal food and everything. Other ones that we really don't need. We already talked about lead. We don't need any mercury. We don't need any cadmium. We don't need any of these things. These things are actually very toxic. And one of the interesting things is that when we look at like what is soluble inside of ocean water, we need a little bit of those things, but these things are just toxic. So they're not really found in oceanic waters. Like our iodine, remember I showed you the marine part of it, so we need a little bit of iodine in our bodies. We need a little bit of copper. We need a little bit of some of these things, but these things we don't need any of. But they can bioaccumulate inside of our things, and then we can actually cause more problems when they become methylated. So methylated, so methane, so they add a carbon onto one of these, then they can really be taken up by the body. And so once these are mixed with a carbon that can be methylated by bacteria, then you can actually get to see really toxic levels of these. So where do cadmium and lead concentrations? We already talked about lead, but these can be getting in, and we talked about Pitcher, Oklahoma. We talked about lead. Mining issues into there. Mercury, again, geothermal vents, so we can find it inside of some of the rocks that are associated with geothermal vents in there. And so when we mine it, we're mining cinnabar. We talked a little bit about that. But mercury is toxic. It's a known toxicity to the miners. This was known to be by Roman slaves and everything like that, where when they were slaves or the Roman Spanish convicts, they had a life expectancy when they were into the mercury mines of only 3 years. Yeah, because it would just cause them. Mad Hatter. Remember we talked about Mad Hatter? Mad Hatter was because they were dealing with mercury and felting. So this causes less teeth. It's deferring things, very, very toxic. And in Minamata, Japan, there was all of these things where they noticed that they called it this disease of this town because all of a sudden all the people in the town had this numbness and blurred vision. It was actually first noticed by the cats. So what happened was this company, this chemical company, was dumping their methyl mercury industrial waste into the water, and it was getting into the fish in that area. And then the people were eating a fish because the Japanese have a very high fish diet, especially in this particular community. They started noticing in the cats first because the cats would be eating a lot more of the fish in their smaller body mass, and so they started noticing all these cats with this disease and stuff into there, and then they started realizing, and so they were doing this from 56, and the pollution problem was finally notified in 59, so that many years of people eating this, but the company kept dumping it until 71. In there. And by 2001, 2,265 victims had eventually recognized. Almost 2,000 people had died from this. And then over 10,000 people received some financial situations from them. So if you go online and type in Minamata disease, you can watch some videos and see what happened to the cats, what happened to the people when you get exposed to too much mercury. It's actually really sad to watch. I don't want to show it here. There was mining issues associated with mercury, especially with cinnabar in there. They would have to heat it in there in order to release it, and that mercury gas would consolidate, and it would just be very, very toxic to the people. And so, but they used mercury for a lot of different things, from beauty aids to thermometers to everything. And so this is where we're mining it. So if you go back and think about all of our mining issues, that's the same thing that's associated with this. Historically, we've used it a lot throughout history. We're now decreasing how much mercury. So in 4000 CBE, cinnabar was used to preserve human bones. So we can see it through the Egyptians. They used it as a pigment because of the color that it would do. It'd be just used in fouling. It would be red ink in there. The Romans extracted mercury and made for getting gold. So when we talked about gold mining, remember we talked about mercury coming in onto it and making it sink more. So the Romans came up with that idea. So this is not something new. So think about when we talked about that before. On the Middle Ages, we had mercury in there. We had they used to use it as a cure for syphilis because it is actually very toxic. It was more toxic to the bacteria, but sometimes it would kill the people too. They would use it as for dental, so it was part of your fillings into there. And then now that use has just gone down, so we don't really use mercury anymore into there. So look up the disease. It'll be interesting for you. And that is all.